Why are you sitting here?
Sorry, I don't see the name on there, sir.
Trash like you doesn't need a name. The room stinks from the moment you walked in. The Watley.
Craig Dutton stood over Byron Ashford, arms crossed, silver star gleaming under the chandelier.
Look at you! No medal, no rank. No one's sitting near you, and yet you still won't go back to the slums.
Byron's scarred hands stayed flat on the table.
I served in this unit. Same as you.
Filthy scum like you are not on the same level as me. Get this trash out!
Laughter spread across the room. Byron didn't move. What none of them knew was who the black man really was. The night that changed everything began 3 hours earlier, on a quiet road outside Richmond. The Willowbrook Country Club sat on 12 acres of manicured land in Fairfax County, Virginia. White columns framed the entrance. 2 American flags hung from brass poles on either side of the double doors. Inside, the grand ballroom had been transformed for the 30th reunion of the 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Enlarged black and white photographs lined the walls. Young men in combat gear, helicopters over desert sand, a unit flag with 3 confirmed deployments stitched in gold. Beneath the photographs, round tables draped in white linen filled the room. A jazz quartet played soft standards from a corner stage. The air smelled of prime rib, bourbon, and old cologne. It was the kind of evening designed to make powerful men feel even more powerful. Craig Dutton had made sure of that. He organized every detail: the seating chart, the guest list, the awards ceremony, the photographer from Military Times. At 65, Dutton still carried himself like a man accustomed to being obeyed. His charcoal suit cost more than most cars in the parking lot. A Rolex Submariner caught the light each time he shook a hand, and he shook every hand in the room. His chest told a story, or at least the story he wanted told. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge. 3 rows of ribbons arranged with surgical precision. He moved through the crowd like a senator at a fundraiser. Loud laugh, firm grip. First-name basis with everyone. Everyone except Byron Ashford. Byron had driven 3 hours from Richmond in a 2004 Ford pickup with 220,000 miles on the odometer. He pulled into the country club lot between a Mercedes and a Lexus, cut the engine, and sat for a full minute before stepping out. His suit was navy blue, clean and pressed, bought from a thrift store on Broad Street 6 years ago. It still fit. He wore no medals, no ribbons, no unit insignia. Just a small bronze pin on his left lapel, so small most people missed it, and those who didn't wouldn't recognize it. Byron lived alone in a 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Richmond. He built furniture for a living. Tables, bookshelves, porch swings. His hands showed every year of it. Thick calluses, crooked fingers, a scar from his left thumb to his wrist. He kept to himself. Neighbors knew him as the quiet man who mowed his lawn every Saturday and never raised his voice. He hadn't attended a reunion in 30 years. He hadn't been invited. This year, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, battalion crest embossed in the corner. Inside, a single card. You are cordially invited to the 30th annual reunion of 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Byron held the card for a long time. He almost threw it away. But then he thought about the men who never came back from Mogadishu. 14 names he still carried. They deserved to be remembered by someone who knew what happened that night. So he pressed his suit, polished his shoes, drove 3 hours to a place where no one wanted him. When he walked through the double doors, the jazz quartet was mid-song. A few heads turned. Conversations didn't stop. They shifted. Voices dropped half a register. Eyes darted sideways, then away. Dutton was mid-handshake with a retired major when he spotted Byron. His smile didn't drop. It hardened. He leaned toward his aide and spoke without moving his lips. Who put him on the list? The aide checked his tablet. I don't see who authorized it, sir. Find out, and keep him away from the stage. Byron crossed the room alone. He passed table after table, every seat occupied, conversations in full swing. No one extended a hand. No one said, "Welcome back." A woman collecting name badges glanced at him, flipped through her box, and handed him a tag without eye contact. He found a table near the back wall. 4 empty chairs surrounded it. He pulled one out, sat down, and set his hands flat on the white linen. The jazz quartet shifted to a slower tune. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell in comfortable waves. Byron Ashford sat in the middle of 60 men who once wore the same uniform, and not one of them remembered his name. An hour into the evening, Dutton took the stage. He tapped the microphone twice, waited for the room to settle, and smiled the way a man smiles when he knows every eye belongs to him. 30 years, he said. 30 years since we wore the scroll, since we bled together, since we proved what it means to be Rangers. Applause. A few men raised their glasses. Dutton gripped the podium with both hands. "Tonight, I want to honor the heroes of this battalion, the men who ran toward the fire when everyone else ran away." He started reading names, each one followed by a short story. Lieutenant Dan Mercer, who held a rooftop position for 9 hours in Grenada. Staff Sergeant Phil Harmon, who carried 2 wounded soldiers across open ground in Panama. Captain Ed Weaver, who coordinated air support under mortar fire in Mogadishu. Every name drew applause. Every man stood when his name was called. Every man shook Dutton's hand at the podium. Byron's name was never called. He sat at his back table and listened. His jaw tightened with each story, not because the stories were wrong, but because one story was missing. The one Dutton knew better than anyone. Then Dutton shifted his tone. He leaned into the mic and lowered his voice. The room went still. "Now, I want to tell you about the longest night of my life. October 3rd, 1993, Mogadishu." Byron's hands curled into fists beneath the table. "Our convoy was hit 3 blocks from the crash site," Dutton said. "RPG fire, small arms from every rooftop. I made a decision that night, the hardest decision any commander makes. I led a 6-man team on foot through hostile territory to reach our boys." He paused. Let the silence do its work. "We pulled 14 men out of that kill zone. 14 soldiers who are alive today because of what we did that night." The room erupted. Standing ovation, men clapping with tears in their eyes. Dutton stepped back from the podium, chin raised, accepting the applause like a man who had practiced receiving it. Byron stared at his hands. The scar on his left hand, the one from his thumb to his wrist, started throbbing. It always did when someone lied about that night, because Dutton never left the command post. Byron knew. He was the one who led that team. Dutton wasn't finished. He pulled a framed photograph from beneath the podium, a shot of the Mogadishu airfield, soldiers lined up before boarding. He held it up like a trophy. "This was taken 30 minutes before we launched. Right there, second from the left. That's me." Byron recognized the photo. He had the same one at home. Second from the left was a staff sergeant named Tommy Reed. Reed died on that rooftop. Dutton was nowhere in the frame. He had been 3 buildings away, inside a reinforced command post, monitoring radios and tracking supply routes. But no one in this room knew that. And Dutton had spent 30 years making sure they never would. A retired lieutenant at table 4 leaned over to his wife. "That's the real deal," he whispered. "Craig was in the thick of it." Byron heard him. He closed his eyes for a moment. The scar on his hand pulsed. He could still feel the weight of Morrison on his back. 200 meters, one leg dragging, his lung filling with blood. He could still hear the gunfire, still taste the dust. And now the man who hid behind sandbags was showing someone else's photograph and calling it courage. Byron opened his eyes. He looked at the framed photograph one more time. Tommy Reed's face smiled at him from 30 years ago. Byron whispered under his breath, so quiet no one could hear. "I'm still here, Tommy. I didn't forget." After the speech, the crowd mingled. Dutton worked the room again. Handshakes, photographs, whispered thank yous from men who believed every word. Byron stayed in his seat. He wasn't here for applause. He was here for the 14. 20 minutes later, Dutton arrived at Byron's table. He didn't sit. He stood with one hand in his pocket and the other holding a glass of single malt. Two men flanked him, retired officers, thick necks, smug grins. "Still here, Ashford?" Byron looked up. "Still here." "You know, I've been thinking." Dutton sipped his whiskey. "I don't actually remember you on any mission. Supply room, right? Loading pallets?" "You remember exactly where I was, Craig." Dutton's smile thinned. He set his glass on Byron's table, leaned forward, and spoke quietly enough that only the nearest tables could hear. "Let me make this simple. You don't belong here. You never did. You were a warm body filling a slot, nothing more." He straightened. "The men at this reunion earned their place. What exactly did you earn?" Byron met his eyes. "Ask the 14 men you just took credit for saving." The words landed like a grenade with a delayed fuse. Dutton's face went blank for half a second, a flicker that only Byron caught. Then the mask returned. "Careful, Ashford." Dutton's voice dropped to a hiss. "You start making accusations like that, and I will end you. I'll have your VA benefits reviewed. I'll have your service record pulled. You want to play this game with me?" Byron said nothing. He picked up his glass of water and took a slow sip. Dutton turned to the men behind him. "You see what I'm dealing with? 30 years later, and the delusional ones still show up." One of them laughed. The other shook his head. "Sad, really." Dutton snapped his fingers at a woman near the registration desk. "Bring me the guest list." She hurried over with a clipboard. Dutton ran his finger down the page, stopped at Byron's name, and drew a single line through it with a pen. "There. You were never here." He held the clipboard up for Byron to see. "Just like you were never in Mogadishu." Byron looked at the crossed-out name. His breathing stayed even. His hands stayed flat. "Are you done?" Byron asked. "Not even close." Dutton leaned down until his face was inches from Byron's. "I built this reunion. I built this battalion's legacy, and I will not let some broke, forgotten nobody walk in here and pretend he matters." He straightened his tie and turned to walk away. Then stopped. Turned back. "One more thing." Dutton reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the table in front of Byron. "That's a formal complaint to the Stolen Valor Registry. I'm filing it Monday morning. You wearing that pin on your chest? That little Delta pin? That's a federal offense, Ashford. You were never Delta. You were never anything." The paper sat on the white linen between them. Byron didn't touch it. "I was everything you pretend to be, Craig." Byron's voice was low and steady. "And you know it." Dutton's nostrils flared. He snatched the pin from Byron's lapel, yanked it hard enough to tear the fabric. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger, showing it to the men around him. "Look at this. A fake pin for a fake soldier." He dropped it on the floor. The tiny bronze piece bounced once on the marble and settled near Byron's shoe. The room had gone quiet. People at nearby tables had stopped eating. A woman covered her mouth. Ed Weaver, 3 tables away, set down his fork and stared at Dutton with something between disbelief and disgust. But no one spoke. No one stood. No one told Dutton to stop. Byron reached down slowly. He picked up the pin, wiped it on his sleeve, and placed it in his breast pocket. Then he looked up at Dutton with an expression that held no anger, no pleading, just the calm of a man who had survived worse than this, far worse, and was still breathing. "You can take the pin, Craig. You can cross out my name, but you cannot take what I did. Not from me. Not from the 14 men who know the truth." Dutton stared at him. For one long second, something flickered behind his eyes, something that looked almost like fear. Then he turned on his heel and walked back toward the stage. Byron sat alone. The torn fabric on his lapel fluttered under the air conditioning vent. His hands were still. His pulse was steady. But his eyes tracked Dutton across the room the way they once tracked movement through the streets of Mogadishu. He wasn't leaving. He hadn't come this far to leave. Dutton didn't let it go. Men like Dutton never do. 20 minutes after the pin incident, he climbed back onto the stage. The room quieted. He adjusted his cuffs, smoothed his tie, and leaned into the microphone with the rehearsed ease of a man who had given 100 speeches and believed every one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address something uncomfortable. The jazz quartet stopped. Forks paused mid-air. Every head turned toward the podium. Tonight is about honor, about the men who sacrificed everything for this country. Dutton let the words land. But honor only means something when it's earned. And I'm sorry to say, we have someone in this room tonight who hasn't earned the right to sit among you. He pointed directly at Byron. That man, Byron Ashford, has been wearing a Delta Force pin. He's been implying he served in a classified unit during Operation Gothic Serpent. I want to be clear. His service record lists him as a supply specialist, E4. He never saw combat. He never left the wire. The projector behind Dutton flickered on. A document appeared on the screen. Byron's official service record. Name, rank, unit assignment. Supply and logistics, 3rd Battalion. No combat citations, no awards, just 4 years of inventory reports and warehouse transfers. This is public record, Dutton said. I pulled it myself. Byron stared at the screen. His own name. His own face, 23 years old, clean-shaven, eyes steady even in the photograph. But the record was incomplete. He knew why. Everyone with the right clearance knew why. Dutton pressed on. Stolen valor is not a joke. It's a crime. And it's an insult to every man in this room who actually bled for this country. A murmur swept through the crowd. Heads turned toward Byron. Some faces showed anger, others pity. A few wouldn't look at all. I've already filed a formal complaint, Dutton continued. But right now, I'm asking Byron Ashford to do the decent thing. Stand up, walk out, and stop disgracing this uniform. Silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Byron didn't stand. He didn't walk out. He sat with his hands flat on the table, eyes fixed on Dutton, and said nothing. Dutton's face reddened. He stepped off the stage and walked straight toward Byron's table. 2 security guards followed. One was tall with a shaved head. The other carried a radio. Last chance, Ashford. Dutton stood over him again. Walk out on your own, or these men walk you out. Your choice. I'm not leaving, Craig. Wrong answer. Dutton nodded at the guards. Remove him. The tall guard reached for Byron's arm. His fingers closed around Byron's bicep and stopped. Byron didn't flinch, didn't resist, but the guard felt something under the fabric. Hard knots of scar tissue. The kind that comes from shrapnel, not carpentry. The guard hesitated. He glanced at his partner. I said remove him. Dutton's voice cracked louder. The guard pulled Byron to his feet. The chair scraped against marble. Byron stood at full height, 6'1", still broad through the shoulders, still carrying the frame of a man who had once fast-roped out of Blackhawks for a living. Hands off me! Byron's voice was quiet. Not a request, a command. The kind of voice that came from decades of training men to move or die. The guard loosened his grip. Not fully, but enough. Something in Byron's tone had tripped a wire in his training. Dutton saw it. What are you doing? I said get him out. Sir, maybe we should... I don't pay you to think. I pay you to follow instructions. Drag him out if you have to. Ed Weaver stood up from table 6. His chair hit the one behind it. Craig, that's enough. Dutton spun. Sit down, Ed. No. Weaver's voice was steady. This isn't right. The man served. He was there. I remember his face. You remember wrong. I don't. Weaver stepped into the aisle. I remember him on the tarmac at the airfield. I remember him gearing up with the rest of us. You want to erase that? Go ahead. But I was there, and so was he. The room shifted. Whispers broke out at 3 tables. A retired sergeant near the bar set down his drink and turned around to watch. A woman at the registration desk pressed record on her phone. Dutton sensed the fracture. He needed to seal it before it spread. He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. Let me be very clear about something. I checked this man's DD-214 personally. Supply and logistics. 4 years. No deployment outside the wire. No combat action ribbon. Nothing. He jabbed his finger toward the projector screen where Byron's sanitized record still glowed. That's not my opinion. That's the United States Army. A retired captain at Table 2 nodded slowly. If it's in the system, it's in the system. Exactly. Dutton pointed at the captain like a prosecutor acknowledging a friendly witness. Thank you, Ray. He turned back to Byron. You see, it's not just me, Ashford. It's the record. It's the institution. You're fighting the entire United States military, and you're doing it with nothing but a torn jacket and a story nobody believes. A few men shifted uncomfortably. Someone at the back coughed. But the tide hadn't turned. Not yet. Dutton still had the podium, the projector, and 30 years of reputation stacked on his side. Byron looked at the screen one more time. His own 23-year-old face stared back at him, the sanitized version of a man who had been erased on purpose. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply turned back to Dutton and said 5 words. The truth doesn't need a podium. Dutton's jaw clenched. He turned away from Byron, but his hand was shaking around his glass. Dutton felt the room slipping. He turned back to Byron, jabbing a finger at his chest. You want to play the victim? Fine. But when the federal investigation opens Monday morning, we'll see whose story holds up. He turned to the crowd. This man is a fraud. If any of you have any respect for this battalion, you won't say another word to him. He walked back toward the stage. Halfway there, he stopped and turned. And someone turn off his mic if he tries to speak. There was no mic at Byron's table. There never had been. But the message was clear. Byron Ashford had no voice in this room. Byron stood alone in the aisle. The security guard had let go completely now. 60 pairs of eyes stared at him, some hostile, some confused. A few, just a few, filled with something that looked like shame. Byron straightened his torn lapel. He walked back to his table, pulled out his chair, sat down, set his hands flat on the linen. He wasn't leaving. He hadn't driven 3 hours to be erased again. Hold on. Pin ripped off, name crossed out, face on the screen like a mugshot. And this man sat back down, straightened his jacket and sat back down. I'd be swinging or crying in the parking lot. That's not stubbornness. Dutton has no idea what he just poked. The jazz quartet didn't resume. Nobody asked them to. The banquet hall hung in a thick, uncomfortable quiet, the kind where everyone hears their own breathing and no one wants to be the first to move. Dutton stood near the podium with a fresh glass of bourbon. His hand trembled. Not from guilt, from the fact that Byron was still sitting there, still breathing the same air, still refusing to disappear the way he was supposed to 30 years ago. Outside in the parking lot, headlights swept across the gravel. A black sedan with government plates pulled into the fire lane. The engine idled for a moment. Then it cut off. 2 doors opened. 2 pairs of polished boots hit the pavement. No one inside the ballroom heard a thing. The double doors opened. Not swung, not pushed. Opened. The way doors open when someone on the other side expects them to stay that way. 2 military police officers stepped in first. Dress uniforms, white gloves, sidearms visible. They moved to either side of the entrance and stood at parade rest, eyes forward, jaws locked. The jazz quartet had been silent for 10 minutes. Now even the ice in the glasses seemed to stop clinking. A man walked through the doorway, tall, silver-haired, straight-backed in a way that made every other man in the room look like he was slouching. His dress uniform carried 4 silver stars on each shoulder. 4 stars, the highest active rank in the United States Army. General Hank Morrison. Every veteran in the room recognized the stars before they recognized the face. Chairs scraped. Men scrambled to their feet. Napkins fell. A glass tipped and rolled across a table. 60 men stood at attention, muscle memory overriding 30 years of civilian life. Dutton nearly choked on his bourbon. He set the glass down too hard. Liquid splashed across his knuckles. He straightened his jacket, squared his shoulders, and started walking toward the entrance. "General Morrison, what an honor, sir. We didn't—" Morrison walked past him. Didn't slow, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the hand Dutton extended. He walked through the center of the ballroom, past every table, past every man standing at attention, past the projector that still displayed Byron Ashford's incomplete service record. He walked straight to the back table. Byron stood, slowly. The torn fabric on his lapel fluttered under the air vent. His hands hung at his sides. His eyes met Morrison's. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then General Hank Morrison, 4 stars, 42 years of service, commander of United States Army Forces Command, drew himself to full height, brought his right hand to his brow, and held a salute. The room stopped breathing. "Sergeant First Class Byron Ashford." Morrison's voice carried through the silent ballroom like a roll call at dawn. "Delta Force, Task Force Ranger, Mogadishu, Somalia, October 3rd, 1993. Byron returned the salute. His hand was steady. His eyes were not. Morrison held the salute for 3 full seconds before dropping it. Then he spoke again, louder now, addressing the room. "This man led a 6-man element through 3 blocks of concentrated hostile fire to reach a downed helicopter and extract 14 wounded soldiers, including a 26-year-old second lieutenant named Hank Morrison." Morrison paused, let every word settle into the silence. "He took 2 rounds, one in the left shoulder, one through his hand." Morrison glanced at Byron's scarred left hand. He did not stop. He carried the last man, me, across 200 meters of open ground with a fractured femur and a collapsed lung. His actions were classified under a top-secret compartmented program for 30 years. Morrison reached into his coat and produced a flat leather case, black, embossed with the seal of the United States. He opened it and held it up for the room to see. The Medal of Honor, a pale blue ribbon, a gold star hanging from an eagle, the highest military decoration the nation can award. This medal was presented to Sergeant First Class Ashford in a closed ceremony at the Pentagon on March 14, 1994. No press, no cameras, no record in any database a retired colonel could access with a Google search. Morrison's eyes found Dutton. The general's expression didn't change. It didn't need to. "As of last week, this commendation has been fully declassified by order of the Secretary of Defense. I'm here tonight to make sure it's recognized, publicly, by the men who should have known all along." Morrison placed the medal around Byron's neck. The gold star rested against his chest, against the torn lapel where the tiny bronze pin used to be. Byron's chin trembled once. He pressed his lips together. 30 years of silence, 30 years of being erased, 30 years of watching another man tell his story, all of it pressed against the back of his teeth and stayed there. He didn't cry. He wouldn't. Not here. Not yet. Morrison stepped back and looked at the projector, the one still displaying Byron's sanitized service record. He walked to the screen, studied it for a moment, then turned to the room. "You see that record up there? Supply Specialist, E4, no combat." He paused. "That's what a cover file looks like. When a soldier operates under a top-secret compartmented program, his real file is sealed. What you're looking at is a ghost, a placeholder. It was designed to make sure that if anyone ever went looking for Byron Ashford, they'd find nothing." He looked at Dutton. "And someone used that invisibility to build a career." Morrison reached into his coat pocket again and produced a second document, a single sheet of paper with a Pentagon letterhead. "This is the declassification order, signed by the Secretary of Defense 6 days ago. It authorizes full disclosure of Sergeant Ashford's operational record, including the names of every man he extracted that night." He set the paper on Byron's table. "It's yours now. It always should have been." Byron looked down at the document. His name, his real rank, his real unit, printed in black ink on official letterhead. 30 years of erasure undone in a single page. His hand hovered over it. Then he pressed his palm flat against the paper and held it there, as if he needed to feel it to believe it was real. Morrison turned to face the room. Every man in this hall is standing at attention. Good, because you're standing for him. No one moved. No one sat. No one breathed. Then Ed Weaver raised his right hand to his forehead. A full salute. Then the retired sergeant by the bar. Then a man at table 3. Then another. And another. One by one, 60 veterans saluted Byron Ashford. Dutton stood in the center of the room. His hand hung at his side. His silver star, the one he wore on his chest like a crown, suddenly felt very, very heavy. The salutes held for 10 seconds. Then Morrison said, "At ease," and the room exhaled like it had been underwater. Dutton moved first. He stepped toward Morrison with his hands up, palms open. The universal gesture of a man who knows he's cornered but hasn't accepted it yet. "General, with all due respect, there's been a misunderstanding. Ashford's record clearly shows—" "I've read his record, Craig." Morrison's voice was flat. "Both of them. The one you pulled up on that projector and the one that was classified above your pay grade for 3 decades. Sir, I coordinated logistics for that mission. I was in the command—" "You were in the command post." Morrison stepped closer. "You stayed in the command post. You never left the command post. I know because I was bleeding on the floor of a rooftop 3 blocks away, and the only voice I heard on the radio giving orders to hold position was yours, while Byron was the one kicking down doors to get us out." Dutton's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I've read every after-action report from that night," Morrison continued. "Every debrief, every classified field assessment. Your name appears in exactly one context: rear logistics coordination. You were never under fire. You never led a team. And the silver star on your chest was recommended by your own adjutant, based on a combat narrative you wrote yourself." The room heard everything. Morrison wasn't whispering. He wasn't being discreet. He was speaking at the volume of a man who wanted 60 witnesses. Dutton turned to the crowd. He searched for an ally, a nod, a sympathetic face, anyone. The retired major at table 1 looked away. The men who had flanked him earlier were staring at their shoes. The woman at the registration desk was still recording on her phone. This isn't... Dutton pulled at his collar. Sweat beaded along his hairline. "I served this battalion for 35 years. I built this organization. I raised money. You raised money on stolen stories." Morrison let the sentence hang. Ed Weaver walked to Byron's table. He didn't say anything grand. He extended his hand. Byron looked at it for a moment, then took it. Weaver squeezed once and nodded. That was enough. Then the retired sergeant from the bar crossed the room. He stopped in front of Byron and saluted again, longer this time, eye to eye. "I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry." Byron nodded. "You're saying it now." One by one, men approached. Some shook his hand, some saluted. One man, a gray-haired veteran with a cane, touched the Medal of Honor on Byron's chest and whispered, "Thank you for bringing my son home." His voice broke on the last word. Byron gripped the old man's hand with both of his own and held it. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Across the room, Dutton tried to leave. He grabbed his overcoat from the back of his chair and walked toward the exit. The 2 military police officers stepped together, blocking the doors. "Colonel Craig Dutton," the taller MP spoke without emotion. "The Department of Defense Criminal Investigation Division has opened a formal inquiry into falsified combat records, fraudulent decoration claims, and material misrepresentation in federal defense contracts tied to your service history." Dutton's face went white. "You can't. This is a private event. You have no jurisdiction." "Sir, we have jurisdiction everywhere." The MP handed him a folded document. "You're not under arrest, but you are directed to report to CID headquarters at Fort Belvoir by 0800 Monday. Failure to appear will result in a federal warrant." Dutton snatched the paper. His hands were shaking so badly, the document rattled in the silent room. He looked at Morrison, then at Byron, then at the 60 men who had been saluting him all evening and were now watching him the way you watch a building come down. No one opened the door for him. The MP stepped aside, just enough for Dutton to squeeze through. He didn't look back. The doors closed behind him. The sound echoed through the ballroom. Byron sat at his table. The Medal of Honor rested on his chest. The torn lapel sat just above it, a reminder of what had happened before the truth walked through the door. He looked at the empty podium. The projector still glowed. His old service photo stared back at him from the screen. 23 years old, clean-shaven, eyes steady. For the first time that evening, Byron Ashford smiled. The video hit the internet before Dutton's sedan cleared the parking lot. The woman at the registration desk, a retired Army nurse named Gloria Tate, had recorded 7 minutes on her phone. The clip started with Dutton pointing at Byron from the podium. It ended with the military police handing Dutton a folded document at the door. She uploaded it to her Facebook page at 11:14 p.m. with one line of text. This man stole a hero's story for 30 years. Tonight, the real hero got it back. By midnight, the video had 200,000 views. By sunrise, 2 million. By Monday morning, every major news outlet in the country had picked it up. The Washington Post ran the first in-depth piece. Their Pentagon correspondent had spent the weekend pulling declassified records from the Defense Department's electronic reading room. The article opened with a single sentence. For 3 decades, the wrong man wore the medals. The story laid it out in detail. On October 3, 1993, during the Battle of Mogadishu, a 6-man Delta Force element led by Sergeant First Class Byron Ashford had moved on foot through 3 blocks of concentrated hostile fire to reach a downed Black Hawk. The team extracted 14 wounded soldiers from a collapsed rooftop position under continuous RPG and small arms fire. Ashford sustained 2 gunshot wounds and a fractured femur. He carried the last man, Second Lieutenant Hank Morrison, 200 meters across open ground while returning fire with his sidearm. The mission was classified under a top-secret compartmented program. Ashford's name was removed from all public records. His service file was replaced with a sanitized cover, Supply Specialist, E4, no combat history. He was awarded the Medal of Honor in a closed Pentagon ceremony attended by 12 people. He was told he could never speak about the mission, and he never did. Craig Dutton, then a captain serving as rear logistics coordinator, had access to the after-action reports. In the weeks following the mission, he authored a fabricated combat narrative, attributing the rescue to himself. He submitted it through his own adjutant. The recommendation was approved without independent verification, a failure in the awards process that the Inspector General's office would later call a systemic breakdown in accountability. Over the following 30 years, Dutton leveraged the stolen valor into a career. Silver Star, Bronze Star, speaking engagements, a seat on the board of 3 defense contractors, federal consulting contracts worth $12.4 million, all built on a story that belonged to Byron Ashford. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit opened a joint investigation with CID within 72 hours of the video going viral. Agents executed search warrants at Dutton's home in McLean, Virginia, and his office in Arlington. They seized hard drives, financial records, and correspondence dating back to 1994, including a letter Dutton had written to the Battalion Association's membership committee recommending that Byron Ashford be permanently removed from the reunion guest list. The letter was dated 1996. It read, in part, "Ashford's presence undermines unit cohesion and raises questions about our standards." For 28 years, that letter had kept Byron out of the room. The investigation uncovered more. Dutton had systematically blocked 3 other veterans, all black, from attending reunions and receiving unit commendations between 1996 and 2018. Internal emails showed a pattern. Any soldier who might contradict his Mogadishu narrative was quietly removed from mailing lists, denied invitations, or told the events were at capacity. Gloria Tate's video continued to spread. CNN ran a primetime special. A retired Delta operator, face obscured, voice altered, confirmed on camera that Byron's mission was real and that the classification had been weaponized to protect the wrong people. The interview was watched by 11 million viewers. Families of the 14 rescued soldiers began coming forward. 6 of them released a joint statement. "We owe our fathers, our husbands, our brothers, to a man none of us were allowed to thank. His name is Byron Ashford, and he deserved better than 30 years of silence." The hashtag Justice for Byron trended for 9 consecutive days. Veterans across the country posted their own stories of stolen credit, suppressed records, and racial discrimination in the military awards process. The conversation had grown far beyond one country club in Virginia. It had become a reckoning. The federal grand jury convened 6 weeks later. The charges were severe. 4 counts of fraudulent decoration claims under 18 U.S.C. Section 704. 2 counts of wire fraud tied to defense contracts obtained using falsified military credentials. 1 count of obstruction for tampering with personnel records. Dutton's attorney entered a plea of not guilty. It lasted 9 days. On the 10th day of trial, Dutton took the stand. His attorney had advised against it. Dutton insisted. He believed he could explain. He believed the room would listen the way rooms had always listened to him. He was wrong. Under cross-examination, the federal prosecutor played a recording, an old radio transmission from the Mogadishu command post. Dutton's voice, clear and unmistakable, giving the order to hold position. Not leading a rescue, not moving through hostile fire, sitting behind sandbags and telling other men where to bleed. Dutton broke. Not dramatically, not with a confession scene from a movie. He simply stopped talking mid-sentence. His attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. "Colonel Dutton," the prosecutor said, "did you lead a 6-man rescue team on the night of October 3rd, 1993? Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "No." "Did Sergeant First Class Byron Ashford lead that team?" A longer pause. Dutton looked at the table. "Yes." "Why did you claim otherwise for 30 years? Dutton's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. "Because I was scared that night. I stayed in that post because I couldn't move. And when Ashford came back carrying those men I was supposed to lead, I knew I'd never measure up." He swallowed. "So I made sure no one would remember him." The courtroom was silent. The judge removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Dutton was convicted on all counts. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. 8 years in federal prison. Full forfeiture of all military decorations, permanent disbarment from federal contracting, dishonorable discharge retroactively applied to his service record. His name was struck from the battalion's wall of honor at Fort Benning. The same week, Byron Ashford was invited to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee. He wore the same Navy suit, the one from the thrift store on Broad Street. The torn lapel had been mended. The Medal of Honor hung around his neck. He spoke for 4 minutes. He didn't mention Dutton once. "I'm not here to talk about what was taken from me," he said. "I'm here to talk about the men who didn't come home. 14 soldiers were pulled out of Mogadishu that night, but others weren't. And their families have spent 30 years not knowing the full story because the records were locked. That's not security. That's silence. And silence doesn't protect anyone. It just makes it easier to lie." The committee room was quiet. A senator in the front row wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Byron's testimony led to the introduction of the Ashford Transparency Act, a bipartisan bill requiring mandatory declassification review of individual combat commendations after 20 years. The bill passed the Senate 94-6. Byron Ashford drove back to Richmond the next morning. Same 2004 Ford pickup. Same 220,000 miles. Same 2-lane highway cutting through Virginia farmland. The only thing different was the leather case on the passenger seat, the one holding the Medal of Honor. He pulled into his driveway and cut the engine. The house looked the same. 2 bedrooms, a workshop out back, a lawn he mowed every Saturday. But when he stepped out of the truck, he noticed something new. His next-door neighbor, an older white woman named Helen who had never said more than hello in 8 years, had hung an American flag on the fence post between their yards. Beneath it, a handwritten note taped to a mason jar filled with wildflowers. "Welcome home, Byron." We should have said it sooner. He stood in his driveway for a long time, holding the jar. Inside, Byron placed the Medal of Honor in a small glass case on the mantel. He set it beside a framed photograph, 6 young men in combat gear, standing on a tarmac. 3 of them didn't come home from Mogadishu. Their faces smiled at him every morning when he made his coffee. Now the medal sat between them, where it belonged. He went back to building furniture the following week. Tables, bookshelves, porch swings. His hands still knew the wood. His shoulders still ached in the cold. Nothing about his daily life changed, because Byron had never lived for recognition. He lived for the work in front of him. But the world outside his workshop had shifted. Ed Weaver called 3 days after the reunion. Then he called the next day, and the day after that. Within a month, the 2 men had formed something neither expected, a friendship built on the wreckage of 30 years of silence. Weaver had carried his own guilt. He knew something was wrong with Dutton's story. He knew it in 1993. He said nothing. That silence cost him sleep for decades. Together, they founded the Ashford Weaver Veterans Fund, a non-profit supporting Black veterans whose service records had been suppressed, misclassified, or erased. Within its first year, the fund raised $2.3 million and assisted 46 veterans in having their records corrected through the Board for Correction of Military Records. General Morrison kept his promise. Every year on October 3rd, the anniversary of Mogadishu, he drove to Richmond. He parked in Byron's driveway, walked up the porch steps, and sat in one of Byron's handmade rocking chairs. They drank coffee. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Some things only make sense between 2 men who bled on the same street. West Point invited Byron to speak to the incoming class the following fall. He wore the Navy suit, the one from Broad Street, mended lapel and all. He stood at the lectern in Thayer Hall and looked out at 1,000 young faces. He spoke for 6 minutes. No notes. "You're going to spend your careers being told what courage looks like," he said. "Medals, promotions, ceremonies, and those things matter. But the courage that will define you, the kind nobody writes about, is doing the right thing when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when the room is empty and the record is sealed, and the only person who knows what you did is you." He paused. The hall was silent. "That's enough. Trust me, that's enough." The cadets gave him a standing ovation that lasted 2 full minutes. Byron nodded once, stepped away from the lectern, and walked out the way he walked into every room, quietly, without asking anyone to move. Craig Dutton began serving his 8-year sentence at FCI Petersburg. His medals were returned to the Department of the Army. His name was removed from every honor roll, every donor wall, every reunion program. The battalion's official history was amended with a single footnote. Previous accounts of the October 3rd rescue operation have been corrected to reflect the actions of SFC Byron Ashford, Delta Force, classified. Back in Richmond, on a Tuesday evening in October, Byron sat on his front porch, a rocking chair he built himself, a cup of black coffee. The American flag on Helen's fence post moved slowly in the autumn wind. The sun was setting behind the tree line, turning the sky the color of old gold. For the first time in 30 years, Byron Ashford wasn't carrying anything. Not the silence, not the weight, not the names of men who owed their lives to someone the world had forgotten. He took a sip of coffee, and he smiled. This story's fiction, but sitting in a room where nobody sees you, picking your medal off the floor, that's real for way too many people. Byron didn't need the salute. He just needed one person to tell the truth. That part's going to live in my head for a while. So here's my question for you. Have you ever looked at someone, in a waiting room, on a bus, at a family dinner, and assumed you knew their story? Have you ever been the person no one sat next to? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.